Hello, my sweet loves. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Jay, and guys, today is the day we welcome fall with open arms. Whether you're in the north and you're fully in it, or starting to really get into fall and it's crisp and lovely and sweater weather up there, or whether you're still sweating it out with us down south, but the mornings are becoming brisk and lovely and the whispers of fall are just starting to fall around your shoulders. It is time to talk about what I read and what I recommend to watch to welcome in the fall season. Now, the first book that I want to talk about to welcome the fall season with is The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. Guys, what else? What else? If you've been with me for a while now, you've probably heard me talk about this book one or two times because I am obsessed with The Rules of Magic. Seriously, I have it on audiobook and I will turn it on at any moment in time, whether it's the depths of winter or the depths of hell in this southern summer heat. I will turn it on just so I can feel a little magic and a little fall and a little cozy. So this book centers around three protagonists, Franny, Jet, and Vincent Owens, and they find out in their late teen years that they are part of a long lineage of powerful witches. So they go one summer to spend some time with their eclectic Aunt Isabel to learn more about their family and where they come from. Now, while this book definitely sets itself in Massachusetts and talks about witchery a lot, I will say that it is magical in its own right. For sure, there is magic, but it also talks deeply about family bonds and what it means to love and be loved. And I just think it is one of the most perfect books in history in general, but definitely one of the most perfect books to ring in the fall season. The next book that I want to tell you about is The Scorpio Races by Maggie Stiefvater. Now, Maggie Stiefvater is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. The way she writes is so very atmospheric and very immersive. Anything that I read of her, she just finds a way to whisk me up and plop me down wherever her story is taking place. And The Scorpio Races is no different. Now, The Scorpio Races is just about what the title suggests, the Scorpio Races. Every year on the blustery, cold island of Thisbe, November 1st, the Scorpio Races happen. And what those races entail are mostly young men. They train really intense, dangerous, wild, magical seahorses for a couple weeks just in time for these Scorpio races. And inevitably someone gets hurt, someone may die, and they're just a very dangerous sort of game. This book is perfect to set you in that fall mood because it takes place in a cold little ocean town, and it takes place mostly through October, and it just puts you in that sort of moody, overcast sort of feeling where you want to, you know, curl up with a mug of tea, maybe a blanket, and read about some dangerous seahorses. I love this book and everything about it, and I plan to read it every year just in time for the end of October / the beginning of November, just because it just rings in the season so well. The next book that I want to tell you about is The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. Now, this book is really interesting in terms of a recommendation for this list because it doesn't actually take place during the fall season. In fact, I think it takes place midsummer, maybe part of the book gets to the end of summer. Now, why I want this on my list is because it is very immersive and atmospheric. The action and the intense moments happen very quickly in this book, and it's a quick read. It's a very pleasurable read. So it takes place in the sort of moody town of Sparrow in the Pacific Northwest of the United States. And in the local lore, back in the day, 3 young sisters were convicted of witchcraft and were sent to their death by drowning in the harbor. And every summer, they come back to exact their revenge. And what they do is they each possess a young girl and lure a young man into the harbor to their death. Now, this book is just so, I'm gonna say atmospheric like 10 million times in this video, but that's what it is. It just puts you in that small town vibe and makes you feel like fog and mist is rolling around you and mysterious things are happening. And I just find myself wishing I could visit Sparrow just every now and then. Every now and then when it's really too hot, it hasn't rained in a while, I just want to know what it's like to be in that moody corner of the US with a witchy legend of possession. And I just think it's going to be a great book to reread right at the beginning of fall. The next book that I want to tell you about, guys, is City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab. Now, this book, oh, it's so delicious. It is just a wonderful middle grade that I was thoroughly surprised by, but I shouldn't have been, because Victoria Schwab never fails to understand me and please me just with her writing and her atmosphere and her immersion. Now, City of Ghosts is about our young protagonist, Cassidy Blake. And Cassidy Blake, she can see ghosts. And not only can she see ghosts, she can communicate with them. And her best friend happens to also be a ghost. Not only that, she also has parents who are ghost hunters, but they're like the skeptical kind of ghost hunters where they don't necessarily believe that they're real and they go out there to sort of like disprove them. Well, they get approached to host their own TV show and travel and go ghost hunt, and their first stop is Edinburgh, Scotland. And so there Cassidy Blake finds herself in the middle of some ghostly adventures. And guys, I haven't read the second book in this series yet, but I'm kicking myself because it is so good. If there's one book on this list that you should read to ring in the fall season, it's City of Ghosts. And that's a big compliment, because Rules of Magic is like in my top 10 books of favorites of all time. But City of Ghosts is just so good because not only are there really spooky moments in this book, there's also really wonderful, beautiful descriptions of Edinburgh. It just really made me want to go to Edinburgh and check out all of these places that they talk about in the book. And I don't know, there's just something about hearing about these spooky places in Edinburgh that I really felt like it was fall, it was overcast, it was sweater weather, and we're about to go ghost hunting, guys. The next book, guys, that I want to tell you about is The Bookshop on the Corner by Jenny Colgan. Now, this is an interesting book that for me to put on this list because, for one, it does not technically have anything to do with fall. I will say that the reason it made it on this list was because it just has so many wonderful scenic moments where it talks about the countryside of Scotland. It really describes like the hills and the weather and the lots of fields with, you know, leaping sheep and stuff like that. And another reason why this is not my normal pick is because technically I'm still in the middle of this book. I'm close to the end, but I am in a place where I know that this is gonna be a 5 out of 5 star read. I heard about this book for the first time on Darling Desi's BookTube account, and when she talked about it, I was like, yeah, that's gonna be me. Another reason why this is an unorthodox sort of inclusion for me is that it's not horror, it's not sci-fi, it's not fantasy, it's actually contemporary. It's about a girl named Nina who is 29, an introvert, very shy, and she's just out of a job. She was a librarian, and they sort of decided to flip things around, and she no longer was interested in what they were doing. So she decided to open up a bookshop in a van and travel the Scottish countryside, going where people needed books. And if that doesn't scream like, you know, an ode to book loving, I don't know what else does. And why this puts me in the fall mood is because it just makes me so happy. The descriptions of the Scottish countryside and just her taking charge of her life. There's a budding romance in here, and it's just something that's so cozy. I always have tea when I'm drinking it or reading it, not drinking it, but yeah, I always have tea. I always have a cookie or something sweet, and I just feel absolutely wrapped up in this story, and my body loves it. I highly recommend it. Now, the next book that I'm going to recommend to you, I have talked about a lot on my channel. If you've been with me for a while, you'll probably recognize this title. This is Pumpkin Everything by Beth Labonte. Now, I always want to call it Pumpkin Spice Everything, but it always trips me up. It's Pumpkin Everything. So this book is the ultimate sort of like Hallmark movie, like absolutely nothing but pleasure kind of read. It's so cozy, just a smidge corny, but I feel like the author knows what she's doing when she's writing these stories. She knows that she has this Hallmark feel to it where there's a smidge amount of corny that just makes it feel so much like home. Now, this book is about a town called Autumnboro, and it is specifically about a young horror author that recently was jilted in love, and she goes back to her hometown of Autumnboro to go take care of her grandfather and nurse a broken heart. And of course, she runs into an old flame, and it is prime leaf peeping season in Autumnboro, New Hampshire. I mean, the town alone named Autumnboro, like, come on guys, it is perfect for fall. And it is a book that absolutely caters to its audience. It knows what it's doing. The people who pick up this book obviously want a little slice of fall in a novel, and this is exactly what it gives to us readers. I highly recommend this. This is just a plain good time. Now, guys, here is the second half of this recommendation video where we're going to talk about movies that I love around this time of year. Now, let's not get it twisted. I have a whole other list that prepares you for Halloween, because you know your girl is a spooky bitch for life, and if I don't have a Halloween list, it would be sacrilege. But we're talking about movies that I like to watch to ring in the fall season, and I've added a couple new ones. I'm not going to talk about the you know, the usual, like Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town. We all know that we watch these movies obsessively, some of us all year round, but here is a list that I catered for bringing in the fall season. So the first movie that I want to talk about that I feel like nobody talks about, like not enough, this movie does not get enough credit, is The House with a Clock in Its Walls, that came out in 2018. It stars Jack Black and Cate Blanchett, and it is directed by a very prolific horror movie director, Eli Roth. Even though this movie is not horror, this movie is actually made for children, which is really funny. I would have never thought Eli Roth would make sort of like a kid-friendly movie. But this movie not only caters to children, it definitely caters to the adults that are accompanying the children, or just the plain adults over here that act like children. This movie, even though it is an adaptation of a middle grade novel, I honestly think caters to all ages. It is about a young boy named Lewis who, after he loses his parents, he goes to live with his eclectic uncle, Jonathan, in this giant, sort of spooky looking mansion, who actually it used to belong to an evil warlock. So there's magic in this movie, there's Halloween vibes. And guys, when you watch this movie, pay attention to the colors. The colors and just like all of like the little extra bits in the movie really put me in the Halloween vibe and the fall vibe, really. Like there's lots of like rich purples and reds and oranges and dark colors. It is absolutely lovely, and you're just gonna have a great time laughing at Jack Black, laughing at the young kid, and then there are some genuine spooky moments where you're like, yeah, I appreciate this movie. This is a great fall movie. The next movie that I want to tell you about, guys, is The Witch, which came out in 2015. Now guys, if you've not seen this movie and you are a horror movie fan, what are you doing? What are you doing? This, in my opinion, is quite nearly a perfect movie for me. because of a couple reasons. It is a period piece. It takes place in sort of like the 1700s, where the Puritan sort of witchcraft scare was happening in the US. It's about witches and the devil. So with those three things encompassed in that movie, it felt catered to me. But this stars the actress Anya Taylor-Joy, and her family get banished out of their Puritan community for some strange religious kerfuffle that they don't really get into. But they have to try and survive on their own without a community in the wilderness, basically. And I don't know, that sounds terrifying to me. But when their youngest son goes missing, just snatched out of their hands basically by something in the woods, suspicion and hysteria descends upon the family, and everyone believes that it is witches at the hands of this travesty. Guys, this movie, like I said, it's pretty near perfect for me. And I honestly think it is a very, very feminist sort of horror movie. And if you guys have seen it, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to talk to you about it, but I highly recommend this to bring in the fall season, just because it is so moody and dark, and it's in the woods, and there are bonfires, or at least one particular bonfire that I'm thinking of, and there's just something about witches and the woods. Oh, it just makes me feel like I smell cold, brisk, woodsy air and fall approaching. The next movie that I want to talk about is Miss Potter, and that came out in 2006, and it stars Renee Zellweger and Ewan McGregor. Guys, no one really talks about this movie either, and I don't know why, because there are a lot of like Beatrix Potter fans who did, you know, like the Peter Rabbit books, and also, I feel like this would appeal to Jane Austen fans, people who like movies like Pride and Prejudice. This book just details Beatrix Potter's life and how she got to, you know, publishing the Peter Rabbit books, and just what she went through in her daily life as a female author. This movie I really enjoy watching around this time of year, just because a lot of it takes place in the Lake District of England, and I don't know much about the Lake District of England, but I do know that it is very beautiful, and I want to go there and stay there forever. And I hear it's a very big tourist destination, just because it is basically like a nature preserve. I don't know that for a fact, but I think that's the case. And just the scenic moments of the Lake District in this movie, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I really, really love this movie, and I think that it will put you right in that like cozy sort of setting where you're ready to like have a cup of tea and just be your happiest self. Now, here is a movie that I love so very much. This movie is Sleepy Hollow, and it came out in 1999. And guys, I know you know what I'm talking about. Sleepy Hollow is a freaking classic. It has Johnny Depp, Christopher Walken, Christina Ricci, Miranda Richardson, and more. Like, so many good cast members in this movie, and they all come together and just coalesce into the most perfect fall/Halloween movie. And it's all based on the legend of the Headless Horseman. It takes place in Sleepy Hollow, which is a real place in New York, and the colors of this movie are so dark. It's very Tim Burton, because of course he directed it. It's very like gray and blacks and reds, and just like the scenery is so rich, and it takes place in a small town in like what I can only assume is like the 1800s. I don't actually know, but it is just so perfect. I watch it all the time. And also, confession, and some of you know this, but I had a genuine like sexual attraction to Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman in this movie. Like, there it is. I said it. He's a sexy headless dead guy. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. My little middle school self, when I first saw this movie, was like, he's sexy. Guys, the next movie that I want to tell you about is Monster House, and it came out in 2006. Guys, I don't know why people don't talk about this movie more. I remember when it first came out, me and my close friend watched it and we were just so blown away by it. And we were in high school at this point. Do people not still watch this movie? Do they not show it to their children? Because they should. It is an excellent movie. It is basically about a haunted house, but not like, you know, filled with ghosts, but the house itself is like actually sentient and scary and haunted, so it acts on its own. It's so good. The movie is so freaking funny, and it is of course set around and on Halloween, so you get all of those like fall October vibes, and you get just sort of the whimsy that comes along with an animated movie that's geared towards children, but it imparts really heartfelt lessons, and you get to learn why this house is a monster house. Last but not least, guys, is the movie Trick or Treat that came out in 2007. And guys, this movie is basically a love song to my spooky little soul, because it is just everything good and scary in this world. So this movie is actually an anthology horror movie, which means there are different stories in the movie and they all connect at the end, and it is so good. It is done by one of my favorite horror directors, Michael Dougherty, and he just does such a fantastic job at sort of making this movie whole in terms of Halloween vibes, real genuine horror, like moments where you're like, oh my god. But this movie is so good, not only because it is about Halloween night, but it is also just so beautiful to look at. The colors and the shots are so interesting and so good. And the main villain is this young, weird, deformed child called Sam. He goes around with a burlap sack, and he's technically like a trick-or-treater, but he's basically the guardian of Halloween and all of its sort of rituals. It is just so good. If you have not seen this movie, I don't know what's wrong with you. Now, if you're not into horror, this is not the movie for you. I'm going to say that. This is not your wholesome like Halloween night trick or treat movie. But if you are into horror and you don't mind a little scare or a little blood, this movie is so perfect. I watch it every year. Definitely watch it year round, honestly. Most things on this list I do year round because I can't wait for fall. But this movie is so good because not only is it Halloween focused, but the cinematography itself just feels so very fall, and most of it takes place at, actually all of it takes place at night, and you can still see sort of like the fall scenery and the pumpkins. Oh my god, there's so many jack-o'-lanterns and pumpkins in this movie. It's just absolutely perfect. This is just a small list and snippet of my fall rituals every year, but honestly, I just had to share with you all of these fall vibes. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. It really helps my channel, and hit that notification bell so you always know when I've got good things coming to you. Bye, y'all.